We're live.
Beautiful.
Welcome. Hello.
Thank you,
welcome.
my friend. Hello.
I wish we had. It's too bad we don't have any intro music. I feel like we need some like raw power or something.
We do. We need a good Ron Ashton lick to start it off.
To start the whole thing off. Let me see that mug you got. That's cool.
Yeah, this thing is really cool. My buddy made this for me. He works at a place that has, he has a kiln. He does all firing up all kinds of steins. Yeah, it's all raised and it's really nice. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Pretty cool.
Take a picture of that. Put it in the group. People would like to see that.
Definitely will.
Okay. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
To my channel and our new enterprise that we're sort of, just sort of spitballing, seeing what's up. Nick and I met through the internet, like you do most people who have niche interests, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And first and foremost, I've plugged it before on my channel, but Nick runs the Stoogeholics Facebook group, 11,500 strong. If you are into Iggy Pop and the Stooges, go check out this Facebook group. It's phenomenal. The minutia that is poured over. I once asked a question. I got the flesh stripped from my body when I said why isn't Kill City technically the fourth Stooges album?
Right.
And I was met with a lot of no Ashtons, no Stooges. And I said, well, then what's Ready to Die?
Right. You see, our page is it's like a lot of us times 10,
Right.
And you get guys that sometimes don't post for a while, then they'll crawl out and be like, and hit you all with this stuff. It's great. It's really good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So check
really
that out. Everybody check that out. And
yes, Stoogeholics. It's been going on for about 5 years. This lady, Suze Copley, she recently passed away. She started it, but Natalie Schlossman, who was she was really the first Stooges big fan. She championed them late in the 60s. She was a photographer. She's in the movie Groupies too. You can see a hit of her. She's not really a groupie, but she just happened to be in that movie. She's just a major fan. And this shirt is one of her photos. She has a lot of great, she does a lot of Polaroids. So they're really
she knew them.
She was good friends with them. Oh yeah, wow. Really good friends.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, we will talk about that. So check out this group, Stoogeholics, if you're into Iggy and the Stooges. I just want to say that. Now, you guys on my channel, you know me, and you know how I can wax poetic about the Misfits and Samhain and Danzig. Well, I got to tell you, I really love the Stooges. They're one of my favorite bands. This chipped tooth in my front, people, this chipped tooth here, that comes from I got punched in the face during No Fun, Real Cool Time in 2004 during the Iggy and the Stooges set. And when they came back is when I really, really got into the Stooges. But I'm not an expert the way you are. You're the Stooges guy in the way that I'm like the Misfits guy. And so that's why I was like, I'm going to get this guy involved, and I'm going to see if we can get something, rolling here where he's like this is the fact checker, and we can just sort of riff and have a conversation. And so, that's what brings Nick here. Nick, why don't you qualify here and now as to your fascination and love for the Stooges before we dive in and whatnot, and just some of your stuff.
Okay. Well, I come from a heavy metal type background. Okay. So it's in the metal throughout the 80s. Hardcore came after that. But early on when I was looking into bands and stuff, we had a little, back then there was no internet. This was, late 80s, mid to late 80s time. So there was this little record store by my house in Schenectady, New York, which is by Albany, the capital, as you know, and real cool hip guy in there. He's like, hey man, you like such and such, why don't you check Iggy out? And I've heard of Iggy, and I was like, all right, he had like cassettes. It was all cassettes and records. So it was Instinct. So Instinct was the first album I got, and Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, as you know, was involved in guitar, and I got into Iggy then, started liking Iggy, and I started branching out, getting some more stuff. But it wasn't until I was in Iggy maybe 3 or 4 years before I found the Stooges. And a lot of these bands are a natural transition because, like the Misfits, my dad got me into Elvis. I loved sci-fi 50s, 60s stuff. So that was a natural thing to the Misfits. It was a no-brainer. Just like the Stooges, it's I put them on for my dad, the first record. He's like, it sounds a lot like the Doors, and I was really into the Doors when I was younger. And then like in metal, like in that kind of stuff, it's almost like I was forward and then I went back to these bands. And the Stooges just, you can't classify them. They're punk, they're jazz, they're rock, they're fusion of all sorts of things, and they also pioneered everything. So I took to it. It's a primordial, primeval sound, and if you like rock and roll, if you like metal, if you like any of that stuff, it's so easy to get into it. Yet alone Iggy's catalog, because Iggy's touched on every genre in the book.
You know what's funny? Two things that I find very fascinating about what you just said. One, you said, "Oh, I'm a metalhead." You got into Instinct, which was Iggy trying to do the heavy metal, chasing the heavy metal fad that had been going on, the hair metal, whatever.
Yes.
And two, I find it fast. Usually people get into this, they get into the Stooges first and then Iggy Pop. But it's interesting that you got into Iggy first and then the Stooges.
The other way.
In reverse. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting how that worked,
And then it seems like, after that, then I see, when you start liking bands, it's like it lights up for you in different areas. I was watching SLC Punk and I was like, oh, that's 1969 in that movie, just little things. And then I seriously got started into record collecting. I've always been a collector of all sorts of things, militaria, records, toys, Japanese robots like Danzig, collected all that stuff. But the record thing, I really got into it hard, and when eBay was first coming around. So I got everything I could, every bootleg, every record. And, there's something to that. I felt like I put so much, like you put into the Misfits, so much energy into that.
Right.
And right around the same time, after I was in it really hard, the reunion came back. And I was like, wow, I'm super, super into this band now. And 33 years later, and there they are, California.
So we got into them at the same time. That's pretty funny.
Yep. Right around that time, a few years earlier. I've been collecting for maybe 3-4 years. And I'm like, wow, I feel like I personally brought this band back.
Dude, isn't it funny how that, but it's so funny how that works. Where like
you're on the pulse of things.
You get into something like that was me and the Pixies. I'm a big Pixies fan. And I got into the Pixies just as they were reuniting. It was the same thing with the Stooges.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how it's like a cosmic, and that's why, the other day when we were doing the live show for the Lodi live show, whatever.
Right.
And this girl who was 18 years old, she's like, "Oh, I started listening to the Misfits in 2016." And I'm going, wait a minute.
Right.
So you've never known a time before you've never known that the dark ages, the long dark ages that we all went through. You know what I mean?
Oh man. You don't even know, like before the internet, when I was getting into the Misfits. I love the Misfits hard. Just, just like I love the Stooges, and so hard to find anything. Like Legacy Brutality, I had to order on a cassette from across the country because it wasn't even around. The only time I saw it was on a list of tapes. There was a period between when those 45s and everything came out during the late 80s when all those records are gone. You might see an Evil Live here or once in a while. So it was all bootlegs in the late 80s. But the one thing, I used to go to Wild with my parents every year in New Jersey, and of course New Jersey, so Lodi, all the stuff comes out, right? So I'm in Wildwood. And I just walked down the boardwalk the one day. I was by myself. I was like, you're so excited on vacation. There's this little store. I seen some posters in there. every wall was all the original Misfits posters. I bought the Ed Gein one off the wall.
Wow.
The Subway Sam Hain posters.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a
wow.
like
You had a Subway Sam Hain poster?
I had the one with the initium with the cards.
Yeah.
I had the giant Glenn Mike Legacy.
Did you sell
Subway
those,
poster.
or you still have? You still have them?
I sold them all years
ago. Did you get a good price? You get a good price for that stuff?
Not back then. It wasn't too much. You know,
you could have made a mint today, man.
Oh my God! I had the Halloween with the lyric sheet. I had Beware shirt. I had all the shirts. You know, all the original stuff was still around at that point. And I'm like, oh my God! It's like I'm thinking back. Oh my God! If that store existed today and you went in there with all that stuff on the walls, you'd be a millionaire. It's crazy how the market has gone up for this stuff.
Oh, it's exploded. We will definitely explore that too. You know, I just want to change the track on you for 1 second.
Yeah.
When you turn, you know what you kind of blew my mind with? I never first of all, if the Misfits is like a vast collecting universe, right? Like Iggy Pop alone, let alone Iggy Pop and the Stooges and Stooges and Iggy stuff, there is so much stuff between bootlegs and singles and
those two bands.
Holy crap.
You could fill a warehouse with the stuff.
Holy crap. Just endless menagerie to wade through, it's insane.
I had Incredible Hulk issue 1, the comic, right? I was collecting comics years ago, and this guy was like, I got a Misfits bullet. I'm like, what? I go, I'll give you the Hulk issue 1. I'm like, I'll trade you that for that. That's how hard I was into the Misfits. The Hulk comic is worth thousands at that point, but I never saw it. You can't get anywhere. There's no eBay. It ended up being a bootleg back then, but it was, Blank Records, but the label was blank. This was maybe 88. So I'm like, oh, that must be right. Blank Records, the label's blank because there's no book or no internet to check stuff.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy?
Oh, it was crazy. Crazy back then.
That's what's so insane is that in your mind, you're like going, oh yeah, blank records.
Right.
That makes sense to me. There's no internet. I don't know.
That's how naive it was,
Yeah.
Collectors have it way better today for that, but they also have it way worse because the prices are, I don't even,
right.
It's just crazy.
There's more information, but the prices have gone up. And when the prices were cheaper, there was no information. So it was there was always some caveat.
Catch-22, yeah, totally.
It was a catch-22.
Yeah.
But but there's just there is tons of stuff. And, it's a really great time to be a Stooges fan with the release of, I don't know if you picked one up. I did not because it was outside my price range, but that Rhino box set, that Funhouse.
It's a great box set. I have the
You
CD
got that
set.
thing?
The CD one.
You got the CD one? Oh my God.
I didn't get the vinyl one, but I have the CD one.
Holy crap.
Because at the time I was buying 2 of the other original 45s that sent me back a few $100. It was either I get this, which I know 900, however there was, if I forgot how many there was, or I get these
500, limited to 500. No. It was limited to 1970. It was 1,970 copies because it was 1970.
Cool
stuff.
That Stooges picture with Iggy on the crowd back there, that's the original one from the Funhouse promo, but it came with a reprint of that and a reprint, I think, Down on the Street 45. It was a nice set.
Henry
I have
Rollins that
championing it.
Yes, he did a video. He did an unboxing video with it. I have for Record Store Day, they re-released 1969 single, and I have that one, which
very cool.
I mean, I was like, dude, Stooges, I love the Stooges. So.
Totally.
But
now the flip side of that is different than the original one, though.
Real Cool Time.
Yeah,
Real Cool Time, I think.
The Real Cool Time 69 Italian is like that. But the other one, the other 1969.
So you know your shit, man.
Oh yeah.
You know your shit. This is why I wanted to do this with you, because I knew you would just be so much more knowledgeable that I could talk to you, but that you could be like, oh, and then the Italian fucking and just know, man. That's what I appreciate about you. Truly.
Oh man, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
I put everything into whatever I'm into, and it's like
Before we get into our the meat of things, tell me about, because you know we're talking a little bit about the Misfits here, and there is going to be, obviously, folks. We're both Misfits fans. Misfits will come up. This is a Stooges show, but there will be other things that bleed into the conversation. So, you know, I know that Nick has had some run-ins with Danzig and stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that before we get into the rest of it? Tell me about this.
So Danzig, it was Lucifuge tour, the beginning leg of it here in Saratoga. So at that point, I've been into Misfits and Samhain before Danzig became the band. So my friend called me and he's like, "You gotta see this video, Twist the Cane. Danzig's got this new band." I'm like, "Twist the Cane?" I'm thinking like a cane. I'm like, "What?" I didn't realize it was Cain and Abel because I couldn't read it. So I'm like, "Oh my God." So I saw the video. I'm like, "I can't wait." And then they announced it the next day. You know, he was coming local, original lineup. So I got all my friends together. We went down there. I posted some of the pictures on the site. So we're there, I think maybe 2 hours early because, you know, Saratoga Winters, it's not there anymore. It's burned down, but you could sit and wait next to where the tour bus or where they get off and go in. So we're there. I'm shaking. I'm like, this is Danzig. I'm going to meet Danzig right now. I'm like, I put my whole heart and soul into this guy for the past, 6 years, whatever it was at the time. So excited. I airbrushed a poster of him, because I'm an artist too. So I airbrushed a picture of him, his arms. I had all my shit to sign, Unholy Passion, a bunch of crap. So he gets out. No, first Erie gets out. So Erie, oops, sorry, lost shit. So Erie gets out, walks in. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, Erie's, he waves to us. Then John Christ gets off, walks in. Chuck. So we're waiting. I'm like, when's Glenn getting out of the bus? So Glenn gets out of the bus. I'm like, holy fucking shit, right? I'm like, because, you're a kid. I'm 19 years old. It's my idol in the flesh who I've been staring at pictures of for 100 years. So he gets out. I'm like, hey, man. So go to shake his hand. And I know you've heard it before, but the clammy, cold handshake of death. All I could think of is shaking the Grim Reaper's hand. It was just what it was like. Cold,
wet, cold fish.
Wow.
Cold,
not a hard
fish.
handshake, but whatever. Okay. I didn't give a shit. So I'm like, oh my God, Glenn. I'm like, I love your music. I'm like, can I get a picture with you before you go in there? He's like, you've got a fucking camera. I'm like, whoa, like right off the rip. I'm like, is this guy really going to friggin' burst my bubble right now? Because I've been waiting to see this guy, I'm like, total jerk, right? So I'm like, yeah, right. So I handed Erie the camera, and I'm like, Erie, he came back out. He goes, you take a picture of me and Glenn? I go, this is what you do. He's like, man, I'm a photographer. I'm like, all right. It was just like one of the Snap old style cameras. I wasn't thinking. I didn't even know he was a photographer at the time. So he took a couple pictures. Then I go, you mind if I ask you some stuff, about the Misfits or whatever? He's like, no, I don't talk about that. I'm like, all right. I'm like,
ouch.
Fan. I'm like, well, of course, the seminal question. What's 138 mean? Find that shit out by yourself. I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, so crushed. So anyways, took pictures with him and Chuck and Erie. Never got to meet John. The show was completely, to see that first tour show was,
I bet.
I think they did Death in Its Arms too. Because I remember
oh my God.
it
Shut up.
On the home video, right? Those few notes of it. And I'm like, what is that song? I go, it's not on the albums. I don't know what it is. Later came out on a bootleg 45 that I had, but they played that. They played, the whole first album and some of Lucifuge. I think just about all Lucifuge. It was the beginning of that. The first tour I think was Soundgarden in the city with Danzig, took them on tour. But this was with Trouble. They were also on Def American, Rick Rubin. I don't know if you ever heard of Trouble. They're kind of like a harder Zeppelin kind of band.
Okay.
Really good band, really sludgy type thing. So anyway, after the show, I got to go back to him. He signed my other stuff. He's sitting on the bus, really different, really cool after that. Talked to everybody.
Loose.
Super loose, super nice. It's almost like, before Iggy goes on a show, he's all hemmed up, jumping around, boxing backstage. You see him getting all ready, boom, boom, boom.
Is he? Is that what he's like?
Oh yeah, totally.
I don't know. See, now you are. This is the stuff I don't know about. I do know that there is a dichotomy. There's Jim Osterberg, and then there's Iggy Pop.
Nice
right?
Ypsilanti guy. Yeah, right. So so he gets, he's outside backstage pumping crazy. When he goes out, it's, you don't want to say it's possession, but something takes over you.
It is, man. It so is.
In a Misfits tribute. So anyway, I know that feeling when you go on stage, you become something. You pull something from somewhere. If you're a person who can feel and throw the music back, it's totally something. But he becomes that total lunatic when he's the most articulate, intelligent, guy you ever want to talk to, Iggy. So,
it's a great example of that. Super quick. Great example of that is you're going to know the name. I don't know the name. I think it's Paris in 1991, that live show.
Yes. Kiss My Blood.
Kiss My Blood. Thank you. That's what I meant to say. When they opens up with Raw Power and he's just like, come on, you motherfuckers. And he's just like,
great.
You just feel his energy as it's just unbelievable. The way he's like pumping himself up.
He's thick. And throwing the mic stand around and just
he goes,
crazy.
God damn it. And then he like flips the face. It's so crazy.
He don't care. Ron said so many times he was hit by Iggy's mic, just Iggy's like he's just in that bubble. Whatever's around him is gonna be destroyed. Have you heard Henry Rollins talk about Iggy before? Have you ever seen that video?
One of the best Henry Rollins stories ever.
When he kicks the Cure's plants down and everything.
Yes. When he talks about trying to show up. Henry Rollins, if anybody doesn't I love Henry Rollins and I love his spoken word. And he tells the story about how Iggy Pop is the true king of rock and roll. And basically the gist of the story is go watch. I'm not about to do it any justice. Go watch it. It's on YouTube. Go watch the, because it's all about Henry Rollins' storytelling, which is like just phenomenal.
Even if you didn't know Iggy and you heard somebody telling that story, it's phenomenal.
Right. It's a phenomenal story. And he just basically is like, I'm a guy from Black Flag. I'm going to show Iggy a 1-2 punch. And like, he's just like, every time he tries to upstage Iggy, and this is in the 90s.
Amazing.
Henry Rollins is like a man of, late 20s, early 30s. And Iggy's in his 50s.
Yep. Yeah. Late 40s, 50s. Yep.
Yeah, and just like running circles around Henry Rollins, and the story. It's told in 3 parts on YouTube. I don't know if maybe those videos got deleted. It's about 30 minutes.
You got to link that down below after.
I will. I'll find it.
Great.
I'll find it.
But the point I was getting to was like, Danzig didn't show that, but in another way, I think maybe he's gearing up for the show, right? Danzig in his own way. He was putting on some sort of thing because after like he blew his provincial load, so to speak, he was super nice, relaxed dude when he got off stage.
Right.
Could be a coincidence, could be, but it could be that too, But we've all heard how he is, If you mention the Misfits back then, he'll throw you in the fire like Ricky Rackman on MTV,
Yeah, but you want to know something too? I think that, I want, this is a generalized statement about all musicians in general, that like, again, you said even for a Misfits tribute, like before you go on stage, or at least for some people, especially if you're performing in front of a large crowd and there's pressure and you've been traveling all day, or you're, or you're trying to keep up a persona. And it's like, once you get all that stuff out, all of a sudden it's like your guard gets let down. And, but then there's the reverse too, where you have people that are like super friendly and like have all this energy before a show, and then they perform the show, and then afterwards it's like, dude, just leave me alone. I got nothing. I got nothing for you. I left it all on stage. So it's like when you catch a musician and they're kind of being raw. I've been in that situation. I was in that situation with the dude from the Necromantics. And
really, I like that.
Yeah,
band.
I was supposed to. I was invited by his management to interview him, and he kind of snubbed me. And it wasn't until a couple months later when I was with a tour manager, I was in Europe, and was with this tour manager doing this, as part of this thing. And he's like, well, you don't know. You just don't know what a guy on a tour is going through, because he's, it's like a road dog, this guy, trying to like, break it down for me,
right.
So I stopped taking it so personally, but that's what I was thinking of when you were saying that story. Hold on real quick. I just want to go to the comments. I see we got Rue Morgan in the house saying Iggy is literally a nuclear H-bomb. We got Chris Corkum. Welcome to my channel, Chris. This is Nick. I'm Jeff, and welcome. So glad you're here. We got Robbie Bloodshed in the house. He says, enjoying this conversation as I self-admittedly don't know that much about Iggy. And man, Robbie, there's like a whole world that you got to explore, man, because you will appreciate it. Robbie is a big Misfits aficionado like us, but he also loves Queen. He's a big guy into Queen.
Very cool.
So man, you got to check out the Stooges. We got Jason Sullier. Sorry, I'm butchering your name. Saw the Stooges in 2007 and got on stage. Me too.
Gotta do it.
Chicago. It was God, what was the name of the theater? It's Congress, the Congress Theater where Danzig used to play all the time. I got on stage. The first time I tried to get on stage, I got my tooth knocked out. It was in 2004.
Nice. Was it fun and real cool?
Yeah, he says, this isn't Nazi Germany. Everybody get on stage. The second time was 2007. I did get on stage. I did jump on Iggy Pop. I did touch his leathery skin. I was this close to Ron Ashton as he was like riffing.
Nice.
I was this close to Mike Watt as he's going like having an embolism while he's playing.
He looks like a gorilla. Like he turns into this caveman with the Stooges.
Yeah, total caveman. Total caveman when he's doing the thing with the Stooges.
It's hilarious. The nicest, speaking of like people that you meet though, I've met a lot of, musicians, rock stars and stuff, but the nicest guy I ever met was Johnny Kelly from Typo, and he's friends good friends with Steve Danzig.
Yeah. He's in Danzig.
Super guy. He's in Danzig. So I was talking about Danzig. This is a Typo show. So I was like, what's he like, man? And I get the whole, Glenn is Glenn, man. It's it's really all I can say,
That's one way to put it.
Super nice guy though, Johnny Kelly. Peter Steele too, rest in peace,
Rest in peace. But to get back to Iggy for a second, so this guy, and this is what I think has endured, besides what the Stooges did, I think but people, that's why people, that's the first and foremost thing is like the Stooges and what the Stooges did. And we really need to talk about that in a second. But I think that what makes Iggy, part of Iggy's thing is Iggy is not I feel like there's a difference between a singer and a vocalist. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, definitely. And there's a difference between a performer and a vocalist.
Very true. How would you define that? How would you define that, though? What is a difference between a singer and a vocalist? And then where does frontman and where does...
okay. I consider... Okay, Elvis had a great voice, but Elvis is a performer.
Okay.
The difference is...
valid. Yeah.
Here's how I feel. If I'm listening to two cassettes and you hear both guys sing, you have two CDs, you hear both guys singing, and then you see them both in concert, the only way you really know if there's a performer is your eyes are on the person. They're doing something. If their mic was shut off and you watch them and they're entertaining, that's a good performer frontman. If they have a great voice, that's a plus. But like Iggy's albums are great. Love his voice and everything, but the Stooges and Iggy are meant to see live. They're the type of band. It's just a live band. It's
but would you categorize him as a singer? Is he a singer or is he a vocalist?
I think he's a little of all of it, really. He's a performer first, a singer second.
See, I think of him as he's like a vocalist frontman.
He's a total frontman. Well,
he's a frontman no matter what.
For me, really,
frontman no matter what.
What I'm saying, either you sing and you bring something else to the table, or you just sing, or you can't sing and you dance around the stage. That's really all you can get.
Like, what about this? Ross the Boss has a band.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ross's band, but Ross has a singer. but that singer is not the front man of the band. He's just the singer.
What you're saying, right?
And so I'm saying, like, Iggy is the front man. Well, I mean, you could have a singer who's also the songwriter, who's also the front man. I mean, it's all interchangeable. But when I think of Iggy in the same way I think of Henry Rollins. These guys are not, and Keith Morris for that matter. These guys are not singers.
No, yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get that.
They are given singing duties, but they're not. People are not coming for their voices,
right?
For the aesthetic. No, that's not true. They are coming for the aesthetics of the voice. I'm having a lot of trouble verbalizing what I'm trying to say.
Right.
They're coming there not for the classically trained vocal performance. They're coming there for, like, a great example. You know, Demented Are Go, the Psychobilly band?
I don't.
There's this guy, Sparky. Check him out. He's crazy. But he got a voice like this.
Right.
And it's a beautiful, gravelly voice, but he's not singing like Danzig.
Right.
Danzig's a singer.
Exactly.
That's, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
He's
a singer then in every sense of the word, if you're putting it that way. You know,
well, but I think of him as a vocalist, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, yeah. Right. I get you. He's a beautiful voice, and he's a great performer, and he's got the whole package. Usually it's one or the other, I see.
Right.
You know, if you can listen to him in a CD in your car and be just as entertained by seeing the show, you know, that's it. You know, it's like Elvis. I love listening to Elvis. But then to watch Elvis is a whole nother, you know, it's a whole nother thing. You're getting all your senses titillated, you know, whether some bands, I love this band, then I go to seeing them and I don't like the band anymore because they're not what is in that package you buy at the store and what you imagined. Right. Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, what's interesting though, is that, like, people keep coming back for Iggy. And I think a part of it, a combination, is obviously they want to hear the classics.
Sure.
They want to see there's an unpredictable element of Iggy. And you know what? The shock rock sensationalism of Iggy differs than, say, someone like Gigi Allen, who's literally resorting to the lowest common denominator. Right. Like, I don't have to have any kind of talent to poop on the stage and bleed everywhere. While Iggy, everything that Iggy does is based on emotion and, like, in the moment unpredictability. It's genuine. Yeah, it's a genuine expression of how he is feeling at the time, as opposed to Gigi Allen, who's like, I'm going to take these laxatives before I even get on stage to make sure that I take a giant shit everywhere.
It's premeditated in Gigi's case, I feel, where Iggy's, what's coming out of him is spur of the moment.
Right. He's like, here's a drumstick.
You know,
like
you've seen the Delta Pop Festival footage from the late 60s where he looks like throws himself on the floor with the mic. And, like, later he did an interview about that. And he's like, wow, why did you? He's like, well, the audience wasn't giving me the attention I wanted. So I threw a tantrum like a child. That's what that move was. Throwing myself on, you know, he went to the audience if he couldn't get anything back. Because you remember then, audiences were seated. There wasn't people standing up. There were hippie times. The Stooges, you had nothing like that then. That was hippie.
Yeah, we need to go back. We need to go back in time. Let's take a time machine. We're going to go back. We're going back in time to a time before punk rock, before heavy metal. You have, let's set the time. Now, people will point out in both, like, in very nerdy sort of matter of fact kind of ways, and go, well, actually, you did have the Sonics, you did have the Seeds, you did have garage rock happening, which I guess was the counterculture music. Sure. However, you did not have. I don't know how to put this. I'm trying to think of. I'm doing this all off the top of my head. You're basically at a time where there's a lot of hippie shit still going on.
Right.
It's pop. It's Beatles. It's the counterculture revolution is about expanding your mind through indulgent. You hear this narrative all the time. Long, indulgent, virtuoso guitar solos, and the pop song. The pop song has been pulled and stretched so long that it's unrecognizable. It's no longer the 3 minute "She Loves You," yeah. Right. It's now this amorphous thing with all these parts and solos, and
one thing I didn't know, Jeff, talking on that, a lot of those bands in the late 60s, British invasion stuff, what you heard on the album wasn't like the Monkees. That wasn't them on the albums. There were session players for a lot of those bands.
Some of them, yes.
It was a lot of
which is why the Beatles were so amazing.
Right.
Which is why the Beatles were so amazing.
Stones, of course. Yeah. Beatles, Stones,
and
all
the
that.
Stones too. Right.
And the Stooges were experimenting with all that drug, acid type stuff then, but it was coming out of them in a different way. They weren't trained as musicians. So
what's the famous line, Nick, that he says that when he talks about it in the interview you did. Nick has had the privilege and pleasure of interviewing the Stooges, being in the same room, which we're not going to talk about today, but is something we have to talk about at some point.
For sure.
You asked him a question, or one of the three of you asked him a question, and he gave the, it's not like, it's kind of a manicured answer that he's had to answer 1,000 times over, but it's the truth. He talks about how they're not thinking in terms of like, I want to make punk rock.
Right.
They're like, I wanted to bring the blues to teenagers. I wanted to do jazz, bring all these elements that were outside of pop music and sort of go back in time. But he says this quote, and I wish I had it off. I'm saying this off the top of my head. It was something like, I wanted to bring the blues to like white teenagers in the suburbs.
And I'll tell you what all that happened from was, as you know, before the Stooges, Iggy was a drummer before he became a vocalist.
So, a phenomenal drummer, from what I understand.
Drummer. And the Iguanas, the Prime Movers. So what he did was, at that point, late 60s, between then and the Stooges, he went to Chicago, and he was like, if I'm going to be a
Paul
drummer.
Butterflu's band.
Right. If I'm going to be a real drummer, I'm going to go to Chicago and learn from the black drummers and the black musicians. So he went there and he played with some pretty big names. And what happened was, he said to himself, okay, well, I can never play with these guys. It's like honey coming off their fingertips, the way they play. It's like ingrained in who they are, their genes, genetically. So he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Ann Arbor. I'm going to go back to, Detroit area, get these guys, and I'm going to do my own version of that, what these black guys are doing, but how I see it. And I'm going to take everything I learned here, bring it and put it through them for the audience, the white audience, or whatever audience he was, wanted to perform for. So that was exactly it. He wanted to bring all that, and they were looking for the fringe. They weren't playing to the guys who were, the hippie type that were, intellectually whatever. He wanted the fringe. He wanted the outside people. These are the people that were going to understand this music. It's as base as can be. You got to remember that first album, they were told to create those songs. Before that, they weren't playing any of those songs. Right. As you may know.
From 1967 to 1968 or 69, it was so super avant-garde and like weird. And
big Harry Parch, Sun Ra, these type of guys, they made instruments out of vacuum cleaners. Yep. You put a mic in a blender.
Right, mic in the blender, for sure.
Golf
Vaseline shoes, on the face.
All that. Golf shoes and contact paper and microphone, dancing on them. Scott Asheton, the drummer, had kettles. They spray painted a lot of dirty words and shit, and he played them with hammers. It was like that. It was a whole
straight up avant-garde. Yeah,
avant-garde on acid, weed, and just went to town with it. The first show was on Halloween too.
I did not know that. In '67.
Yes, at a little party at a frat house.
So you have to imagine, kids, guys, people. Imagine this. What else is happening in 1967? A few months earlier, Sgt. Pepper, the pinnacle of what is going to be of pop at this time, of like what music has been building towards for the last 10 years, really. It culminates, and all of a sudden, the counterculture at the same time in 1967 is happening too, because you have the Velvet Underground, you have the MC5, and you have Iggy and the Stooges, all in their like very early stages, gestating and formulating, and they are the reaction to the reaction. Because here's the thing about those garage bands I mentioned. What are the garage bands for them? The garage bands are still doing, even though their music is raw and dirty and rough and wonderful and just like amazing, they're still kind of in the same mold as a band like the Beatles or anything else. You know,
Sure.
they're still in that sort of paradigm.
Right.
These bands, the MC5,
C5,
the Stooges,
Yep.
and the Velvet Underground are the like they are
the
not,
underground of the time.
Yeah, the underground. They are doing they're not trying to chase the puck. That's what it is. The
Right.
garage bands are chasing the puck that's already been established. And those guys are like, no, we're going to like do our own thing. And if you really want to trace it, the next thing that pops up that really refines what's happening, because all that stuff is considered to be proto-punk.
Right.
And what proto-punk means, it's punk music before it has a punk attitude or a punk aesthetic of some kind that would come in the next 10 years, but it was established at a time before there was a word for it. So they call it proto-punk.
It ended up being the template for the bands that came soon after.
Right. And the next phase of that would be like the New York Dolls.
Right.
Would immediately come right after that. Yep. But what's interesting is, this is what I really wanted to pull from what you said, because you said it so well, how they played and it came like honey from their fingers, and he realized he was never going to be able to run with them because he could never soar to such heights. But there's one other element that comes into the picture, and that is he sees Jim Morrison in the Doors.
Yes.
And he sees this guy walking around in leather pants without his shirt on.
Yep.
And, you know, the Doors are not punk. Even though we inherited the neutron bomb, which is in the LA punk story, actually begins with the Doors. It does not begin with the Stooges.
That's the Please Kill Me of the West Coast.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yes, that too. It's in Please Kill Me as well because of Elektra.
That neutron bomb book you're talking about with the germs and all the
LA that's the West Coast Please Kill Me.
That's what I consider it.
Right. No, you're super right about that. And what you have is, so you have Iggy is, you know, as he puts it, I'm quoting Iggy. Iggy's like, I was humping some girl while I was watching Jim Morrison. I couldn't take my eyes off of Jim and his magnetism and stuff. So he's taking that and everything he learned as a drummer playing with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band in Chicago. And this is what happens. And Nick, I'm sure you can, you know it, you could relate to this well or understand this concept. It's a phenomenal concept. This is the concept of all creativity. It doesn't matter what it is, no matter what kind of music, no matter what kind of film or art or anything, person witnesses and sees thing that connects with their taste and aesthetic that they aspire to, and then tries to do it themselves. But when it goes through their filter,
right,
it turns into something completely different.
Do you know who the master of that is? Is Bowie. It was the master of that.
I would say, yes, Bowie was the master of that, but you know what my favorite example is? Yes, but my favorite example is the Ramones. Because the Ramones are like, we love the Stooges, but we're trying to write like, I want to write Beach Boys. Yeah. Like what? Wait, Sheena is a punk rocker. That's punk rock, right? No, says Joey Ramone. That's a Beach Boys song. Yeah.
It's a Beach Boys sped up. The Beach Boys are one of my favorite bands too of all time.
Love the Beach Boys.
But excellent show too.
Yeah. Did you see the 2012 reunion?
Yes, it was fantastic. Here
I saw him at the Westchester County Center. It was awesome.
Amazing show.
Awesome show. But what a treat. But like, so you have all these different elements. You have the Doors, who really are just like, you know, whatever, the American rock and roll, you know,
right?
Like, and you know, the Beatles are British, right? So the Beatles are huge, but they're a British band. What other big American bands were there? There was the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
There was the Doors.
Yeah.
There was Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
people
like the
forget
Doors,
before Elvis, all there was Frank Sinatra. That was the closest thing to rock and roll you had. You got to remember, rock and roll was still in its early birth pangs in the 60s that time. It only had come out 50, 55?
It wasn't even 10. It wasn't 10 years old. It wasn't even 10 years old.
Right.
So it's this brand new thing. And then what happens is that it gets so unwieldy and so like it's unrecognizable by the end of the 60s. And so if there is I talked about this in the group because people were mad about like stuff Glenn Danzig was saying. And I just kind of rolled my eyes at it because I go like, dude, punk rock is happening all the time.
Right.
The first rock and roll is punk rock.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
All punk rock is the counterculture reaction to whatever is happening at the time. And they found a term for it in the 70s. They called it punk.
Totally.
It happened in the 90s with freaking grunge or whatever. Yep. It happened, it keeps happening. And you know what it's happening now? And people will probably hate me for saying this. Right. Now you have all these SoundCloud rappers making music in their bedroom that we all hate and find it unlistenable. But it's like, that's punk rock.
What it is.
That's punk rock.
Since Elvis first shook his hips, I mean, it's been every generation without a label, like you say.
Going against the grain, doing the counterculture thing.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. What were you saying?
Another thing I was going to mention about the Doors thing that Iggy pulled from that. When he first saw Jim Morrison come out, the first time he saw him, he said he was really quiet. He was this Dionysian-looking man with the curly hair.
Dionysian.
And his voice wasn't really like you get at the albums. It was more of a high-pitched kind of voice. But he was
doing a baby voice, right?
Right. And what he did... He pissed off everybody. All the girls' boyfriends, all the girls liked him. And when he saw that, he knew he was going to take that. That's something. You're causing something in somebody. What I feel good music is if you get any kind of emotion that's a super strong emotion from it, in some way, that's good music. Like any publicity is good publicity. You know what I mean? Anything that gives me a strong emotion, if I don't like it right away, I'll give it a second shot. And Iggy saw that and Morrison and took that further, took that a step further. I was just, I don't know if you saw on the page that he was going to sing for the Doors. You've heard that. They wanted him to be the second singer for the Doors.
Well, hold on. You're blowing my mind right now because I always thought he was just trying to do a band with Ray. You're telling me that after Jim died, they were like, let's Iggy to replace him.
This wasn't the Night City band thing. At first they asked him, and Iggy's response was, "That's grotesque. I'm not going to emulate a dead man." Was what he had said.
Mad respect.
Later on, after the Stooges broke up and everything, he did that stuff with Ray Manzarek. And there's a cassette of that floating around, which is this guy
I hear it's the Holy Grail, right? Holy Grail.
It's like Night of the Living Dead video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody's got it. You owe history. You owe history, buddy. You know what I mean? Why aren't you showing that? You're gonna sit on it till you die.
You know what? Here's my counter argument. I 100% agree with you, and as a fan, I want to see it. However, I also understand, whether for the public good, it should be shown no matter what. Yeah. But there are still people, if it's in their possession and they own it and it's their property and they want to make a buck off of it, they're trying to make a buck off of it. And they can't, if they release it into the ether. And listen, hold on. I am so not saying that it should not be out there. I think it should. No. But there are some people that
okay, but if somebody's had this tape since 1974,
they're not doing anything
with it. Buck,
they would have done it.
Make it already.
You're right. No, you are absolutely right about that. And it's just a shame that it's not out
when
there.
The reunion came out, bang, Iggy's huge right now. I'm going to get that tape and make some money. Didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Especially now that Ray's passed away. Holy crap. I mean,
another moment that could have been capitalized on, if he was after money,
Totally.
It's like, people are like, maybe he doesn't really have it then. Maybe it's snapped. Maybe he just has a picture of it. And on the other side is a doll show that's never been released too. So that's another thing people are after. Yeah.
How early is that doll show? How is that on the same tape?
70,
that's so weird.
5 like that, probably.
Wow.
5 around there. Yeah.
Wow. So now why do, all right. So now the thesis statement to bring it back around, what the theme of this particular show, all the stuff we're talking about. So that basically, and again, for those of you who are not familiar, like Robbie, you say you're not that familiar with Iggy and the Stooges. Here's what you have. Here's what I try to suggest to everybody. And Nick, you let me know if you agree with this or not.
Where you'd start? Is that what you're going to say?
It's not even where you would start. It's like there are 2 points of reference that you really need to understand what the Stooges did and how they changed music forever up until that point. The first is, imagine the year 1970. Think about all the bands that were around in 1970. Like, think about all the bands that were either just forming, like you had Led Zeppelin was just starting to, cook. Black Sabbath is just coming into being. They're not calling themselves Earth anymore. They're calling themselves Black Sabbath. You have the Beatles are breaking up. Like, it's this pivotal moment, 1970, and then listen to a song. You think about like everything. Jimi Hendrix is still out. Like, and there's all this stuff that the Doors are at the height of their powers. I think Janis Joplin is still alive. Like, all this stuff is happening, and then listen to "Down on the Street" by the Stooges. And
might as well be from another planet. You know what I mean?
You go. That is what they were making in 1970, and it's straight up punk rock. And you go,
timeless.
Holy fucking shit!
Right?
What is this?
Exactly.
Like, what is this?
And you could put it on in any decade and say that song just came out, and it would sound like it just came out. That's the other thing, the timelessness of it. And there's no references to anything modern, so it's like it could have been from any time, and and
there's no music.
Go ahead. Go.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
Well, I was going to say, you look back and people say, "Oh, punk rock," but you got it. Those albums were deconstructed rock and roll, put back together again with Funhouse is really rock jazz fusion. I think it is. They all have a different flavor, to them.
LA
They're all
Blues
punk rock in attitude, definitely. You know what I'm saying? But each album is a whole capsule of different influences. Where a lot of bands, you hear one record, you've heard them all. It's different. Even in Iggy's solo career, it's completely like that. All over the place.
All over the place. But you listen to that and you go, that was being made in 1970, and you go, that right there is like, that's the birth of everything.
That's it.
In that, and you go, well, what about I Want to Be Your Dog? I'm like, yeah, but like, it's not like you listen to I Want to Be Your Dog on the album versus like hearing it played live.
Right.
It sounds a lot tamer. It's not dangerous. The first Stooges album is not dangerous.
No, and it was impromptu too.
Right.
Also,
Funhouse is dangerous.
That's my favorite album.
It's dangerous, man. You listen to a song like Dirt.
Right.
Like, this is a 7-minute song, and he's singing about feeling like dirt, and he don't care. And it's the blues. It's the blues, but it's also like this idea, like this is literally like everything that the Ramones are going to do in a couple of years. It's like
exactly.
all this, and you could go, well, what about the Beatles? Help, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black. Yeah. Like, it's not like the Doors did. I mean, the Stooges didn't invent this thing, but they brought this primal, stripped down energy.
Right.
Back,
it's the energy. It is.
It's live. They recorded this thing live in the studio.
Hardly any bands had done that up to that point that I even know of that played that live like that, with very, very few, overdub guitar tracks. Right. Very few.
Yeah. It's really, and then the final song isn't so much of a song as it is a cacophony of chaos.
Freak out, they call it. Freak out.
Yeah, a freak out. And you just go like, what rock band is doing a freak out?
No one.
Not even the Beatles. Maybe the Beatles are kind of doing that. I guess, the Beatles can be very avant-garde.
Oh, for sure.
Themselves. But it's just, you look at France, you go, wow, that was 1970. And then you look at 1973 and a song comes out, and Jack Rabid from Big Takeover magazine, he wrote an article that I should really find the article and reread it. And basically what it is, what he says, like, if you want to throw a dart on the bulletin board of like when punk rock officially begins, like the sound, like the first modern sound of punk rock is I Got It Right. That version. Yeah. There's a few versions of I Got It Right, but there's I don't know what it is. You probably know better than me. There's one version that's really dirty, and it's just like
So Olympic Studios is the one that I know which one you mean. There's actually a CD that has like 7 or 8 versions of
Heavy Liquid. Is it called?
No, it's called I Got It Right. It's by Bomp, and it was just like an EP45, and it's got I don't know 5 or 6 versions on it. Yeah, but that song is definitely
that riff.
That's the bullseye of it.
Yeah, that's the bullseye, like and. So these two defining, and then you have all these things, I would say those are like 2 giant holes that being punched through the wall. And then you have like all these other things that are happening at the same time. You have the dolls are coming up. Right. You have all these other things that are sort of formulating and happening, but it's these 2 moments that really are pinnacle in, and that's why, I last episode, someone asked me a question, and I'm very curious to hear your take on this. I think they're a very interesting band, but I think there's been a little bit of revisionist history in terms of pronouncing death as the sort of like founder of punk rock. And I would say it's more of like an isolated incident.
I think it's more the idea of that, finding something no one's ever heard. Hey, look, these are black guys doing punk rock, which is in itself, a little
outside
bit different.
Of the norm. It's outside of the norm. Yeah.
Netflix, whoever puts this thing on there, look at this gem of a thing. I mean, it's good, but I definitely I agree with what you're saying. Totally.
The reason why I say that it's isolated is because it didn't influence the music that came after the way these two
it was Funhouse and nobody heard it.
I Got It Right. Like, boom, those 2 things. And when everybody heard that changed everything. And then really you have, they trace back the Stooges lineage. You have the Sex Pistols, who literally were the Nirvana of punk rock, right? Like they just sort of blew up everything, made it an international household name.
Well, that was his favorite
band. Ramones.
Cobain's favorite band was the Stooges.
So was the Ramones, and so was the Sex Pistols. All 3 of these bands were into the Stooges. And so you look at who the Ramones influenced, because the Ramones, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree with this statement. I'm going to make it anyway. The Ramones, next to the Beatles, might be the most influential band of all time. I mean, they're so incredibly influential. I would say even more so than the Stooges, if I'm being honest. They are just like, they literally, their sphere of influence spread to every conceivable music imaginable.
Well, and all those guys, New York punk bands, you got to remember, punk then wasn't one sound like it is today. You think of punk, you think of the fashion. Those were all art bands, basically art people from New York. Right. You had the Velvet Underground, you had Blondie, which was absolutely nothing like
television,
punk rock, television. You had all these other, bands that
Heartbreakers.
Have you seen Ivan Krause, the Voidoids? Have you seen Ivan Krause footage of CBGB back then? It's really nice package they put together.
I did not see his. I don't know if I've seen his footage. I might have seen it floating around on YouTube. But Ivan Krause, you mean the guitarist that worked with Iggy, right?
For Iggy, yeah. It's great.
On Party and Soldier, man.
Yeah.
Good albums.
Oh, for sure. Ivan Krause was really good, dude. For sure, he was great. He was documented so much back then. It's a good hour and a half, but he has so much.
I'll check it out. I didn't know he was filming stuff.
Oh yeah, that one snippet of the Stooges on stage in 73 that's black and white is his footage too.
That's at Max's?
Iggy's you could tell he's really doped up bad singing, and the crowd's around him. I think it might be at Max's.
Because
you know who's auditorium, one of those two. But
because you know what happens, like they play Max's, that the Dictators are in the crowd. Then the Dictators start a band in 73, just as you know what I mean? Like that's how. So even with me saying what I said about the Ramones, that doesn't happen without the Stooges. So the Stooges are this like linchpin
catalyst
of they are such a catalyst, and that's why that's how we're setting the precedent for this ongoing conversation about the Stooges and Iggy and why they are so important. And it took years. It took years for them to get their due.
Right.
Years.
Right. The biggest sleeper band ever. You know what I mean? It's great.
Right.
It really is. And it's nice to see Iggy get this type of recognition, even at this age. You know, he's lived out his life comfortably since the reunion. Before that, I mean, during the 80s, you know, he was living on the street a lot in people's apartments. He didn't have any money, you know.
In the early 80s, in 81, 82, he was flopping around like a fish.
Early 80s, so bad. That Arista time period.
Right, the Arista era.
Right.
And you know what's funny? What's going on, Winston? You know what's funny? No matter what happened in his life, he always found a way to put out albums. Like there is like no holes in his, like there's a few wishy-washy periods, like the mid-70s before he links up with Bowie is like a weird time. And then the early 80s is kind of a weird time, but he always consistently has put out albums. And I'll never forget, he releases, I'm going to butcher this, the French thing that he did not the follow-up, après.
The one before. Yeah. With the King of the Dogs on.
Yes. King of the Dogs is what I was going to reference. It's a phenomenal song.
Yeah.
But I thought it was at the time, it was 40 years. He had been around for 40 years.
Right.
In 2009.
Yeah.
40 fucking years.
Can you believe
and he writes a song called King of the Dogs, or he does a song called King of the Dogs, which is such a far cry, book ending with I wanna be your dog.
Right.
So now I'm King of the Dogs.
That didn't dawn on me. That's a good way to put that.
I just love that you referenced that was the song I was going to reference.
Oh yeah,
that's the King of the Dogs.
The highlight of that album.
I like the opening track is so beautiful.
Oh yeah, is the Michelle the Beatles Michelle's on that one too, I believe.
Oh, does he do? I didn't realize that that is on there.
Yeah, French. Yeah, because the Beatles, you know, it's sung in French too by the Beatles, but that's on there also. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this too. I mean, and that's the thing about Iggy is that just when you think like he's outlived everybody.
Yeah.
And just when you think like, okay, that's it, he's done. He goes, it's like he releases a new album in 2016, which to me is not only the highlight of his, I mean, probably one of the biggest highlights of his solo career.
It's the third Berlin album, I think.
Yes,
Depression.
Dude, totally agree with you. And when he did those live dates,
great shows.
That was those songs all work together.
So good.
The Lust for Life, The Idiot, and Post Pop Depression.
So good.
And Repo Man, and that was it. Like he did all those.
We owe Josh Homme a lot for that.
Yes, I'm very grateful to him for what he. And I'm sad that they didn't do a follow up. Instead, Iggy has done a new album.
Yeah,
I really thought it was going to be. I thought Post Pop would be his final album. I was like, that's it, it's done. And he releases a new album called Free. He never stops.
Free to me is kind of like Danzig's Elvis album. It's a letter to himself from himself type of thing. That's how I see it, you know. And it's a spoken word, really. I mean, there's songs on there, but I consider it kind of spoken word.
It is spoken word.
You know what I mean?
It's very avant-garde. It's very it's experimental, almost kind of like Avenue B was a little experimental, you know.
Yeah.
An acquired taste, if you will. And it's like, you know, it's just amazing that like he's never down out. And the thing about Iggy Pop and what makes Iggy Pop, part of what makes Iggy Pop so indestructible is that it's like, it's always just all Iggy needs is a band behind him and he can go out and be Iggy Pop. No matter what happens, he does that. He goes out and he just he puts a band together. Boom, I'm Iggy Pop. And he does his Iggy Pop thing. And we'll go more in depth into some of the stuff in the future. We're going to land this airplane now. But first of all, I want to thank you so much for coming on and not coming on, for being a part of this and doing this.
My pleasure, Jeff. My pleasure.
I think this could be a really fun exploration of so many things.
Yes. Yeah, we have a lot of similar interests.
Yes, we do. And there's so much ground to cover. But the thing to remember is again, Iggy was there at the beginning, and here he is. All these he's the last man standing. And as we've talked about, and when I spoke to Pete Marshall, I was like, you got to confirm the story. Is it true? Did he really climb the scaffolding and said, you cannot kill Iggy Pop?
Iggy Pop.
And then you sent me that. You sent me the photos. I'd never seen the photos.
I wish so much out of anything to been a fly on that wall when Iggy and Glenn met. That story he was telling.
Was that okay? So for those of you who are unaware, I had Pete Damian Marshall from Sam Hain on my show. Pete and I go back some ways. I had interviewed him many years prior, so he came on the show. And most people know him from Sam Hain, but what some people don't realize is that he was also Iggy's guitarist for 8 years. Yeah. Played on a whole bunch of albums, wrote songs with Iggy.
Skull Ring, he was on a lot of them. Yeah.
Naughty. I don't think he was on Naughty Little Dog. No. He came in around that time. He's on Mask. No, not Mask. What is it? Beat 'em Up. Beat 'em up.
Avenue B, and Beat 'em Up, Skull Ring.
He wrote Blood on Your Cool, one of my favorite.
That's a great
Iggy solo. Great song.
Great song.
And so he was around. There was this whole thing he was explaining. Because I asked him, I was like, he was telling me about how Glenn and the guys in Sam Hain came by backstage at an Iggy show to ask Damian Pete to come back and do the Sam Hain reunion, and that Iggy and Glenn were backstage together.
So crazy.
And Glenn reveres Iggy on some level because he gave the forward, and they used to think that the Misfits have covered. There's a recording of I Gotta Write somewhere that we'll never get to hear. Maybe Glenn we will. Who knows?
Played I Want to Be Your Dog on his guitar all the time early on. Right. He was saying that interview, and he mentions the Raw Power and the Steve Jones podcast. How much you like that album?
Yes, that's a great interview.
I thought he was going to say Funhouse because it's funny. I seen this thing in an old magazine one time. It says, if you like this album, you'll like this album, kind of thing. If you like the first Danzig, you'll love Funhouse. And I'm like, that kind of, it was funny that those two went together. But they both they're both two albums you can listen to front to back, no problem, without skipping a song,
Easy. Especially, Funhouse is, there are records where it's like, you don't listen to one song. You start the album at the beginning and you listen all the way through to the end. And that is Funhouse. And I can listen to any one of those Stooges records, top to bottom, no problem. I can listen to We Will Fall. Put on We Will Fall. I'll listen to that whole fucking thing. Mumra, Shumra, whatever,
You want to talk about smoking to a song? That would be the one if you're into that sort of thing.
It's actually it's a really interesting song that never gets talked about. The crescendo and the buildup of Anne and the power. Oh my God. The way it and then it goes all psychedelic with his guitar. He's got a really weird guitar sound, Ron, on that album. It's really weird.
Dave wrote the lyrics to that We Will Fall because he was into all that tantric stuff at the time.
Yeah, it's a weird song.
All that stuff,
And the thing too is why does Iggy perform without a shirt? And he explains this in various books, but it's as you said. Iggy believes in the Dionysian principle, like the bacchanal, bacchanal worship, where being he wants to be like an Egyptian pharaoh.
Yes,
he doesn't need any, he doesn't have any tattoos, he doesn't have any piercings.
None.
He's just true to his natural form, who he is. One of a kind, just got to make sure my junk is covered, and half the time my junk comes out anyway.
Right.
Or
on purpose,
Or on purpose, putting it whipping his junk out on amplifiers and then watching it vibrate flaccidly vibrating on
He plays guitar like that with his pants down. And
in blood on your whatever.
Yeah, the Kiss My Blood Paris.
Which is so bizarre. That's my favorite part of the show. Besides that raw power is the fact that you never see Iggy. The only time you see Iggy with a guitar is for Candy, and it's an acoustic, or Till Wrong Feels Right. That's an Iggy acoustic track.
Avenue B. He did a lot of acoustic live.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
because a lot of that's acoustic.
So what's fascinating is you watch this live concert in France, and there is Iggy, and he seems to actually know how to play guitar, because you always wonder, like, can he play guitar? Does he actually know?
He claims he wrote a lot of the songs on Funhouse. Ron says no, but he said he went to his girlfriend's closet.
Right, in the closet. And no, his wife. Wasn't it he married
his wife girl at the time. Yep. He was married for 2 weeks or something like that.
And he went into the closet and he wrote, and I don't even know if the guitar in the Funhouse. It was in the Funhouse that he wrote Funhouse.
Yeah.
So, and for those who don't know, the Funhouse was the house that the band lived in, and it was basically a giant heroin house. And they would squirt water with blood that would turn brown, and it was all over the walls.
Shooting gallery.
The shooting gallery to end all shooting galleries.
You know, that's the thing. One last thing I want to touch on is those.
Yeah.
The later albums. Okay, you know, that's what they're missing. They're missing Dangerous Living. They're missing Youth, and unfortunately, the drugs, because. Those three things.
You mean the Weirdness and Ready to Die?
And Ready to Die.
Oh, we have to talk about those.
That's what those albums are missing, you know.
I think, dude, all I know is, and we really have to talk about this. All I know is I'll never forget the anticipation. And I saw Big Black open for the Stooges.
Nice.
In Chicago.
Nice.
Steve Albini, the guy who produced the Nirvana and the Pixies, right?
Yep.
He goes in with the Stooges to do the Weirdness. And they're thinking, this is going to be the coolest, craziest album. And you know what it's like?
Disappointing.
They took the principle that they had on the original Stooges record of, let's write a bunch of songs impromptu, super quick.
Right.
And they're not timeless. They're songs like
they're not.
ATM.
They're terrible.
She took all my money. Like, what the fuck is that?
But you know what else? The other thing is, I was reading today, I think on the page somebody had posted that you can't blame that all on Iggy and the lyrics, because I guess at the time when Ron was playing with Destroy All Monsters with Niagara singing, I guess all the good riffs he had at that time he used for that band, and all the leftovers Niagara said used them for the Stooges stuff, which blows my mind. That blows my mind that he went with that, you know. And
all I know is that one song, I think there's one song that is timeless, classic on those two albums. Yeah, My Idea of Fun.
Great.
Slays. And you know what's funny you say that, because then you look at like Dead Rock Star on Skull Ring, and it's like, holy shit, is that a great friggin' song?
Oh, those ones on Skull Ring are good, I think.
Yeah, they're all pretty good. Skull Ring is good.
Passing Cloud on the Weirdness is half really good. That song I really like. It's got a good.
I haven't listened to it in years. I haven't listened to it in years.
People like.
I should re-listen to it.
Yeah, you should check it out. And the vinyl has a few extra songs that are decent.
Oh, I did not know that. And one last thing too, and we'll end it here. And then there's Ready to Die, which is I'm baffled by Ready to Die. I'm like, how are these songs, and how are these Stooges songs, and how? And so it's like, it leads me to wonder, because like you basically, both configurations of the band each put out one more album.
Yes,
the
right. That was
classic
James's
band
album, right?
Right. You had Ron's album, and you had James's album. You got literally got one more bite at the apple for each one, and they both are just
they didn't have direction. I think I said they should have put a couple of the really good fans in there and got them on point and remembering, you know, and trying to. Oh, I feel like if I was in that room, I could have helped that band make a great album.
But why not take like old songs that never properly released, like "Cock in My Pocket,"
redo
Joanna,
all them, you know?
"Heavy Liquid," you know, like
all of them.
Just bring them out.
All of those songs.
I mean, but people don't realize. All right, I'm really going to shut up after this. Last thing I'm going to say. After Raw Power, or even during Raw Power, the Stooges have way more songs than like 21 songs that are on their records.
Oh my god.
There are so many Stooges songs that were never like officially recorded. It's kind of insane.
It is.
It's kind of insane.
It is.
There are tons of Stooges songs. And I got to be honest with you.
Open Up and Bleed is like one of their best songs. And that's not,
Open Up and Bleed is a very famous Stooges song that nobody that never really got its due. And then what's interesting too is to go back to bookend it with the Funhouse stuff.
Yeah.
If you really want to hear what the writing, what their mentality was when they were writing, you gotta listen to the Funhouse outtakes box set. You listen to the songs formulate. You listen to something like "Slide into the Future." There's a bunch of those.
So
there's a bunch of they're good, but you see how things kind of form,
and how the lyrics form, even.
Oh my God!
Yes, from
so
beginning
different.
to end.
It's almost like they guessed.
Loose is crazy. Loose like 26 takes or something, and the lyrics, it changes all the way through.
And that's what's so funny. Like by random chance, it could have been any different set of lyrics.
Oh, totally.
Totally.
And he sang a lot of those live. The other lyrics.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, this has been so much fun. We're gonna put a pin in this. We're definitely gonna do this again, you guys. We will. We will. Nick and I will have a powwow and we'll figure out where and what direction we will take the conversation, the ongoing conversation. So please make sure to tune in next time. Same channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to join the Stoogeholics.
Yes,
group.
You guys are all welcome, Stoogeholics. Please come
into the Stoogeholics group. And check out all the stuff in the description. And I'd like to thank Nick, my co-host, and we will see you again. This is how we say we say goodbye on the show. We say peace, and hair grease.
Hair grease.